Rain tapped softly against the enormous windows of Richard Hayes's mansion as the millionaire stood alone inside his private study. The room was filled with expensive paintings, antique furniture, and shelves of leather-bound books. On the surface, Richard had everything a person could want, but lately he had become increasingly suspicious of the people around him. Over the past month, several small amounts of cash had disappeared from his study. Nothing large enough to attract immediate attention, but enough to make Richard wonder who was responsible. His suspicion eventually fell on Maria, the quiet maid who had worked in his household for nearly 4 years. Maria was different from the other employees. She rarely complained, always arrived early, and often helped elderly staff members carry heavy things. Richard had even noticed her quietly leaving food for a security guard who worked long night shifts. Still, suspicion had begun to overpower trust. That evening, Richard decided to test her. He opened the door of his private safe and placed a thick envelope filled with cash inside. He deliberately left the safe open and positioned the envelope where anyone entering the room would immediately notice it. Then he stepped into the hallway and hid behind a partially closed door. "I'll finally know the truth," he whispered a few minutes later. Maria entered the study carrying a basket of freshly folded towels. She placed the towels on a chair and turned toward the desk. Then she saw the open safe. She stopped. Richard watched carefully from the hallway. Maria slowly walked closer. Her eyes fell on the envelope. For several seconds, she simply stared at it. Richard's heart began beating faster. "Take it," he thought. "If you're guilty, take it." But Maria did something completely unexpected. She reached toward the safe, not for the money, but for the door. She carefully closed it. Then she noticed a small photograph resting beside the envelope. Maria picked it up. It showed a younger Richard standing beside his late mother. Maria's expression softened. She stared at the photograph for a moment before whispering, "Your mother would be sad to see you living with so much fear." Richard froze. Maria gently placed the photograph back on the desk. She turned toward the hallway. Richard stepped out. Maria jumped. Mr. Hayes Richard looked at her seriously. "Why didn't you take the money?" Maria stared at him in confusion. "What money? The envelope?" She looked toward the safe. "I wasn't going to touch it." "You could have," Richard replied. "There was enough money in there to change your life." Maria shook her head. "Money that belongs to someone else isn't a blessing. It's a burden." Richard's expression softened. Maria continued, "You've been watching everyone like they're thieves. Maybe the person who needs to be tested isn't your staff?" Richard lowered his eyes for the first time. He realized how unfairly he had judged her. Then Maria added quietly, "Sometimes people become suspicious because they've been hurt before. But if you stop trusting everyone, the people who truly care about you will eventually stop trying to reach you." Richard's eyes filled with tears. He finally understood that Maria wasn't the thief. And in that moment, the millionaire realized the most valuable thing in his mansion wasn't the money inside his safe. It was the integrity of someone who had every reason to take it, yet chose to walk away.